and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff this week on the show. We are here to talk about stuff. It's been a couple of weeks. Not since Sean and I have talked. We've been in constant communication because we're recording various things for Japanimation Station. Season 2 has wrapped. It is completely in the can. That is airing. There are 3 episodes out right now. The 4th is coming out this Tuesday. So please, if you are in the market for an anime podcast, go check out Japanimation Station. It's great. I do plan on bringing some of that material to the weekly stuff in kind of a periodic form soon. So you will see that while we're busy at work on other things as well. But no, we are back for a normal weekly stuff podcast today and next week and in the weeks to come. Busy times ahead. But today is mostly just a catch-up episode, shooting the shit. I've got some stuff to talk about. I played some Octopath Traveler 2. I've played some other Switch stuff. I saw some movies like Creed 3 and Kimetsu no Yaiba to the Swordsmith Village. All sorts of fun stuff to talk about. You have stuff, Sean, too, right?
Yes, I've been playing the video games.
Yes.
It has felt nice to play some new video games that have come out. Because it's been a while.
Yeah. So that'll be today's podcast. It'll be a fun one. It'll be lighthearted. It'll be good.
Yes. I'm excited. It's been a while since we did just a catch-up episode.
Indeed. And it was... Yeah, and again, it's so funny to be like, we've been on a break. We haven't been on a break. We've recorded a massive amount of material, and it's finally coming out in the world, which is great. Thank you to everyone who's listening to Japanimation Station and giving us nice comments, because that has been very rewarding. And yeah, that season is underway, and it's now it is just running itself. It's going through the middle of May, and we don't have to do anything more for it. It feels great.
Yes, it's crazy. It's like, I know that... I'm a sort of a habitual procrastinator on work stuff. So there's something weird about being like, oh my God, like it's just months of this podcast that can just go because we just did it all ahead of time.
It feels good. And, I will say my bank account is already feeling a little bit of the stress from preparing for the next few Japanimation Station seasons.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've bought... Sean texted me the other night and was like, hey, all the stuff for the season we're doing later, you'll learn about that later on, listeners. But he's like, oh, this is on sale over on Right Stuff. You might want to take a look. And then today they started another sale with another thing we're doing later. So I've just got all sorts of anime coming to my house that is for the next, half a year of podcasts.
Yes, yeah, I bought over $100 worth of anime Blu-rays, and I was like, I should curse Jonathan with this knowledge as well, so he can spend that much money too.
Indeed. All right. Well, but that's anime stuff. You know where to go for the anime stuff. Sean, let's organize this today. We will save all the video game stuff for maybe part 2 of this podcast. Let's start with some general stuff. Can I talk about, because I mentioned on Twitter, and I know some listeners were asking me to talk about it, the Demon Slayer event that happened this week. I don't think you were able to make it.
No, I was not, because this was on Friday night, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, where I'm at the end of a grading period, because next week for me is spring break, so all my free time this week has mostly been either playing some video games or been grading in a mad grading fury, so I did not have time to get down to the movie theater.
Well, that's too bad. This was fun. I mean, you're going to get to see this material anyway. But this is, if you are not in the know, one of our favorite anime that is ongoing is Kimetsu no Yaiba, Demon Slayer from Ufotable. And its 3rd season, the Swordsmith Village arc, is premiering, we now know, April 9th around the world. And they did this special event. It came out in February in Japan, and then it was in U.S. theaters on March 3rd, this last Friday. And it was called Kimetsu no Yaiba to the Swordsmith Village. And it was a cool little event they did where it's about a 2-hour experience overall, but it was episodes 10 and 11, the final 2 episodes of the Entertainment District arc from last year's episodes. And then it was the hour-long premiere of Swordsmith Village. Ufotable likes their hour-long season premieres. They've been doing that all the way since Unlimited Blade Works, Fate's Day Night. So they like doing that, and so you got all of that in theaters. It was a very cool thing that they did. It started out with a little text crawl about the basic premise of Kimetsu no Yaiba. Then they played Gurenge by Lisa, the original theme song, over a montage of all the cool season 1 stuff. Then we got the next Lisa song, Akaboshi, which was from the Mugen Train TV arc, and they showed all the Mugen Train stuff. Then we went into a little recap on the Entertainment District arc, and then they played episodes 10 and 11. I thought they would do more to, like, edit the episodes together, because I've seen some of the other... Ufotable's been doing this for a while. All of Season 1 of Kimetsu was edited into a series of movies. There's 5 of them, and you can actually find them out there in the ether. I know Funimation's streaming site has them. For some reason, they're not on Crunchyroll yet, even though Funimation and Crunchyroll are the same thing now. But you can go find these out in the ether, and in those, they do, like, edit them together and cut out, like, overlapping material. This was just straight up episode 10, episode 11, as if you played them on the Blu-ray, but on the big screen looking great. And if you have seen the Entertainment District arc, you know it's incredible animation. It doesn't just hold up on the big screen, it looks better than most movies. Like, it just looks like a big budget movie, particularly episode 10, which is the big sort of climax of the fight where the entire Entertainment District is on fire and Tanjiro is bleeding out of every end of his body. Everything has gone to shit, and it was incredible to see that on the big screen. Very, very cool. And then we got the season 3 premiere, which is called Someone's Dream, and it is, as I said, an hour long. I'm not going to give any spoilers for it, but the first half is very intentionally disorienting, and the second half is very funny, because then you go back to our main characters in the aftermath of the big battle at the Entertainment District. And of course, you get fun gags at the Butterfly Mansion and all of that stuff. And then eventually you get to Swordsmith Village. It covers a lot of material. You meet pretty much every main character from this arc. Sean and I have read the manga, so we know where this is going. And you meet pretty much everyone involved in this arc. You will see why Inosuke and Zenitsu are not in this arc. It's because there's a shit ton of characters, and so you can't have the entire sort of supporting cast along for the ride this time. But it's very good. There is a scene, this is the most spoilery thing I will say, and it's not really a spoiler because this is an extension of a scene at the end of Season 2, but there's a big scene in Muzan Kibutsuji's Infinity Castle, which is his, like, other realm. And Sean, it might be the craziest thing Ufotable has ever done with 3D. And that is saying something, but, like, on the big screen, what they are doing, and it's very clearly a scene that is, like, proof of concept for what is to come in Kimetsu no Yaiba, if you've read the manga. Oh my god, it is one of the best extended sequences, I think, in the Ufotable oeuvre. It feels like that is the reason they put this in movie theaters, is because it's a scene that looks so crazy on the big screen. And it makes part of me now wants the next arc of Demon Slayer to be a series of movies, because that was so cool. But goddamn, it's very good.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very exciting. Yeah, because, we saw briefly the Infinite Castle in, like, the end of Season 1 and stuff. So we've had, like, glimpses of it in, the kind of MC Escher nightmare that thing is. But yes, it is exciting to think about getting some of the stuff in, as you're saying, this premiere, but then also that is a very important location in the very long final arc of Kimetsu no Yaiba. So yes, it's a very Ufotable-esque location. For people who are listening to our Japanimation Station podcast, there's some stuff in Garden of Sinners that has similar, just like, this is an impossible space that is, like, sort of, you need to do, like, cool 3D tricks and stuff like that to put on screen. And it's like the Infinite Castle is that to 11. So
yes, and it's a location that is frankly kind of only lightly seen in the manga, because you're there a lot of the time, but the way Gotoge draws the manga is the backgrounds are not super detailed. And so it's very much a space Ufotable gets to kind of, like, take the idea and run with, and they do that. It's very cool. But yeah, the whole premiere is great. I loved seeing all the new characters. You get some stuff with, Kanroji, the love Hashira, who you would have met in Season 1 a little bit, but we get our first extended scene with her. We meet some other characters, and just, as a fan of the manga, Swordsmith Village has some of my favorite stuff. This is where you get to know a lot of new characters. It's where you first start to see the mythology of Kimetsu no Yaiba come into focus, is this arc. And all of that, this premiere is like, it's another one where you see why they wanted it to be an hour. It's because you get a nice slice of the whole kind of thing that this arc is going to be. And I think people are going to really love it. I'm very excited for this one to air, and just, I know there are several episodes that are going to blow up the internet when they get out, and I'm very excited, because this is a great arc, and if you were worried Ufotable would somehow have dropped the ball, they didn't. It's up to their normal level of quality. If anything, they keep making more money on this, so they have more to put into the show, and it shows. Including this To the Swordsmith Village event, Sean, made $10 million in the U.S. on Friday. Wild. Absolutely wild. Yeah. Mugen Train, the movie, when it premiered in the U.S., made $20 million for the weekend. And that was a wide release in theaters everywhere for a weekend. Anime is big. I don't know if you've heard.
Yeah, because this isn't even like, it's not a movie. It's like a weird special event, right? It's like, hey, we're going to show you a couple of episodes from the old stuff, and then we're going to show you the big premiere. But it's not a movie. So yeah, the idea that it is making that much money is pretty fucking crazy to me.
I mean, it frankly, if you look at how much it's made in Japan, because it also was huge in Japan, I think it's made around the world upwards of $30 million. It's probably made back the production budget of the season several times before it even premieres on TV, which is absolutely crazy. Yeah,
it's like I'm betting we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. Like there's something. It's a weird sort of model, but it makes sense if your TV show is good enough that it can stand up to, let's put it on a huge giant movie screen. It's like, why the fuck not do your cool special premiere event? You know?
Yeah. Well, and this has been going on in Japan for decades, of taking TV material and putting it in theaters either through compilation films or through special events like this. Kimetsu no Yaiba premiered for the first time before it was ever on TV as a movie editing the 5 first episodes together. So Ufotable this is old hat for them. It's just that we're now starting to get this in the US, and clearly, like, the stuff's already made. That's $10 million free dollars. That's pure profit. There's nothing, it's just free money. So yes, they should do it. It's fun.
Yeah, and as someone who I follow, Hanai Natsuki on Twitter, the voice actor who plays Tanjiro, he's been on like a media tour around the world because it's not just America. Like there are other, like, right. I know that I saw a photo from him at the event in Mexico that he shared on Twitter. And it's just like, it's crazy to see. It's like he's being treated like a big, like, Hollywood movie star or something. Like, it's like he's in this, like, video with a red carpet, and there's just this giant sea of people getting autographs from him and stuff. It's like, that's insane that the voice actor who plays the main character on this shonen anime is, like, the Japanese voice actor is getting that much sort of, like, love, and it gets to do his big, crazy worldwide tour, again, for something that's not even the movie. It's the premiere for the TV show that they put in a package for movie theaters. Like, it's really insane.
It is. It's wonderful. It's a cool thing, because, again, this is a normal part of anime culture in Japan, but as you say, Sean, to see it in Mexico and the United States, like, that's new, and that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and couldn't happen to a more fun person than Hanai Natsuki, obviously.
Yes, exactly.
So, the Uno master himself. All right. Anyway, I also saw a movie yesterday. I went to see Creed 3, which is the third Creed film, the 9th Rocky film, if you go in the overall Rocky chronology.
Creed?
It is styled as Creed with the 3 behind it in like a 3D arrangement, which is a nice title treatment, but it is supposed to be Creed 3.
Okay, in my heart, it's Creed.
And I do put this right after Demon Slayer because there is an anime connection here. This one was directed by Michael B. Jordan. In addition to him obviously starring in it, he plays Adonis Creed. And Michael B. Jordan, if you've ever heard him in interviews, is a massive nerd. He is just a couple years older than you and me, Sean, and he grew up in the exact same like era of Toonami and like anime on US TVs. And so he loves to talk about that. And he has been talking up a storm about how Creed 3 was inspired by his love of anime. And I was kind of like, I was excited for this movie. I love the Rocky movies. I love Creed 1 and 2. This is my shit so much. And so I was looking forward to this movie no matter what. But I was kind of wondering, we'll see if there's actually any noticeable anime influences in this thing. No, it's anime as fuck. There is, the way Michael B. Jordan chooses to shoot the fights in this movie is amazing. There's a lot of techniques that are very clearly inspired by the various anime he has mentioned as, you know, touchstones for him, like Dragon Ball and Naruto and things like that.
And and Naruto. So I have not seen this movie, but I did watch the trailer for it, and the trailer is very Naruto. Like it's very Naruto and Sasuke. Seems to basically be the premise of the movie, but with boxing instead of ninjas.
That is pretty much it. And it definitely has, like, one of the cool things. So you have Michael B. Jordan as Adonis Creed, you have Tessa Thompson as his wife Bianca, and then you have Jonathan Majors as this new character, Damien, and it is absolutely a Naruto Sasuke thing. And part of that, moreover, it's just a sort of classic anime rivalry story where you have friends who become enemies, and the way that they are going to become friends again at the end is to punch each other really hard, right? Mm-hmm. And that is such an anime story type. And I think it's great to see it here because, one, I love all the Rocky and Creed movies and all this, but one thing that I think people would generally say about that franchise is that after Apollo Creed in the very first Rocky movie and Rocky 2, none of the, like, opponents really are characters. Like, Clubber Lang is memorable because it's Mr. T, but you don't know anything about Clubber Lang, right? He's a big guy who punches hard. Victor Drago is more of a symbol of the Soviet Union than he is his own character. In Creed, you have the fighters in 1 and 2, and they're fine, but again, they're not really characters. The cool thing about Creed 3 is Jonathan Majors is a full part of the movie. He is a real character. There's a lot of scenes between him and Creed out of the ring, and it's like that anime quality of, like, you really get to know these characters really well before they throw a punch at each other. And that makes the final fight in this movie just really cool. Before you even get into the choreography and everything, you're just very invested in it on the character level. And then Michael B. Jordan does this thing in this movie that I just about stood up and cheered when I realized what he was doing, which is after the first round of the final fight, the fight moves into basically this liminal space where they are in the ring, but it's like this gray, like half empty or like empty arena, but it's not the real arena around them, and like things are appearing around them. And it is the most anime as fuck thing. This is a fight, but now the background's going away and we're just focusing on the characters, and it becomes this like representational version of the fight. And when you come out of that, then you're in round 12. So he represents, because the common thing in Rocky movies is you do like rounds 2 through 11 in a montage. He does it through this really intense fight scene where you also have the characters like just standing opposite each other and screaming like they're trying to go Super Saiyan. It's great. It's very fun. It was all shot with like digital IMAX cameras, and it's very high resolution, like super clear. This is not a digital movie that's trying to look like film. It's really trying to be like you are in the movie. And so it just looks beautiful. It's incredible on that level. And then, yeah, it's just, the acting is superb. Michael B. Jordan is always great. Tessa Thompson is great here. And it was like after the Thor movie last year where it looked like she wanted the sweet release of death being in that movie. It's nice to see her in a movie where she feels like she's happy to be there. I felt happy for Tessa Thompson. Jonathan Majors is always great, and he's great here. It is the least surprising thing in the world that Michael B. Jordan would also be a good movie director. He is a genius. He is one of, I think, the most impressive movie stars to come across in our lifetime. I mean, this is a guy who, his first role is Wallace on The Wire, which is huge. And then his like second big role is on Friday Night Lights, and he's amazing there. And that's before he ever even got into movies or got out of his like teens. And then he's been this massive movie star, and he's great here. I would put this above Creed 2. I would maybe put it a little under Creed 1, but it's definitely in that zone. And I think Jordan brings a similar level of kind of like passion to it that Ryan Coogler brought to that first one. And in general, I will say Creed 1, 2, 3 is a better trilogy than Rocky 1, 2, 3. Rocky 1 is probably still like the best Rocky movie overall, but Rocky 2 and 3 are not as good as Creed 2 and 3. And so these movies rock. I hope there's more of them. As with any boxing series, it gets increasingly ridiculous with each movie to have them come get back in the ring over and over. But, that's part of the fun of it too, right? So I want Creed 4. I want more of these. They're great.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions about this movie. One, this is very important to me. Is there anything in the final fight when they're fighting in the ring and it goes into the liminal space? Is there a moment where it's like intercutting between them as adults fighting and then their kids in their fighting?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes. Okay, good. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, now I have to watch the movie because that is the most Naruto thing ever. That's like the last half of Naruto. That's like every single fight they do that where they're fighting and then it cuts to them. It's like, oh, remember when you're training as kids, and then this is like, this generational whole thing. Yes. Okay, good.
Sean, I'm going to describe it for you. Here's how he does it. This is so great. After the end of round one ends, they go back to their corners and they're staring each other down, and their coaches are like yelling at them like what to do, right? It's their classic boxing movie thing. The sound goes away and you have Creed staring at Jonathan Majors, And when we do the cut, it's him as a kid. And then the kid is staring back, and when we cut back, it's little Adonis. And then they come up on each other and they turn into adults again. That's how he does it. It's so, you're right. Yeah. This Michael B. Jordan is not a fake anime fan. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Because that's like some sort of like, like the quality of science, or is its predictive power, right? So it's like the fact that I could predict what's happening in the last fight without having seen it proves how anime it must be through the science of anime. Yeah, that's fucking awesome. Yeah. Like, because it feels like we are in this big moment, with like what you were just talking about with Kimetsu no Yaiba, and now this, of where like the box office power and the sort of like cultural power of anime in America is, I think, finally like being recognized by people, corporate people who need to make money and want to make money. But then it's also like creators who have been influenced by that, because people from our generation are becoming people who are like directors and stuff. Now they're making their movies, and so they're incorporating that influence, and it's like that's really cool and kind of weird that we are finally at that point where it feels like it's fully happening.
And this isn't even the only one in theaters right now. The new Puss in Boots movie, The Last Wish, which has been one of the most, I think maybe the most remarkable box office success story since Everything Everywhere All at Once, because the new Puss in Boots basically bombed out of the gate, and then like slowly word of mouth crawled back until it outgrossed the original, and it's been huge all over the world. It's still in theaters, even though it's now out on Blu-ray and everything. There's been a lot written about how that movie was visually inspired by Into the Spider-Verse, and that's definitely true. It's also super anime. Like, if you look at how they do Puss in Boots fight scenes, someone did even an edit of lining it up with scenes from Attack on Titan. It's very clear Attack on Titan was an influence on the Puss in Boots movie, and not story-wise, just to be clear. But like visually, in terms of like Attack on Titan has all the sort of aerial combat and stuff, and it's, that sort of thing is very obvious there too. And that's a set of younger directors who are, again, in kind of that Michael B. Jordan age range where they know this stuff. Even Sean, the first scene in this movie, Creed 3, starts with a flashback, and you're in Adonis's room as a kid. He's got a poster up for a Lupin the Third special and for Gundam. He's got a fucking like a big picture of like a Gunpla on the wall. I was just like, this is great. I love the idea of Michael B. Jordan telling the production designer, here's what I need you to get. I need you to find images from these anime and put them in my room. I love it.
I wonder if you thought it would be too on the nose if they put a Naruto poster there. It's like, no, we can't put that front and center. This has to be a world where Naruto doesn't exist, because the characters, it's like in how in zombies movies don't exist in the world of zombie movies because all the characters would know about it. It'd be like, Jonathan Majors and Michael B. Jordan's character would be too self-aware of the fact that they're just doing Naruto if Naruto actually existed in that world.
Yes. Anyway, I love it. I love me some boxing movies. Creed is great. Have you seen any of the Creed movies yet, Sean?
No. Yeah, it's one of those on my list that I keep on meaning to get around to, because I know they're obviously good, and I know I would like them.
Yeah, I think if people are interested, Creed 1 and 2 are on HBO Max, and then Creed 3 is in theaters now. I would recommend it. If you have an IMAX near you, I would recommend that. I do not have an IMAX, and I kind of wish I did, because I can see how some of those big fights near the end, like with the full IMAX frame, would be super cool. But yeah, it's awesome.
Is Sylvester Stallone still in these movies?
He is not in this one. He's in 1 and 2. He's not in this one. They mention him kind of in a historical sense. They don't do anything like writing him out. Like, they don't say Rocky. It feels to me like Rocky is dead in this movie, because he's like just not part of it. But there's a lot of ways you could write around it. At the end of Creed 2, he goes to visit his son who lives in Vancouver. So maybe Rocky is up in Vancouver now, living his final years with his family, and that's why. The real reason is Sylvester Stallone hates the producer, Irwin Winkler, who owns the Rocky rights, and he got fed up and doesn't want to work with him anymore. It's not any beef with Michael B. Jordan, I don't think. It's specifically, he's been dealing with Irwin Winkler since like the 70s and is done. So it's kind of funny.
Because the most anime thing ever would be if in Creed 4 he has to fight Rocky. Like, that's like where, because I know that Rocky like trains him in the first movie or whatever, right? Like, that's like the plot of that movie. So it's like that would have to be the ultimate. It's like, oh, I have to overcome my master. And I think, but that's a thing that's a lot easier to do in anime when you don't have to deal with like an actual living person who's in their like 70s or however old Sylvester Stallone is at this point. It's a little
And
bit
considering
hard to do
that
kind of thing.
in the Creed movies, there's a plot that Rocky was overcoming lymphoma. So like that would be extra. Like, I overcame cancer and did chemotherapy, and now I'm back in the boxing ring. Crazier things have probably happened, but not many.
It's all about the technique, man. It's like it's an aging body, but he's got a master's technique, and that's what Creed has to overcome finally in order to reach boxing nirvana or whatever the fuck happens.
I love it. All right, well, I've been talking about my stuff. Sean, what have you got for us?
I've got a few things. One thing I just want to, while we're still on the anime note, I haven't played enough of this game to talk about it in depth, but I want to just mention it because I've been on my Type Moon shit a lot. Obviously, we have our whole podcast that we did that is now coming out, and I've talked a little bit here and there on this podcast about me doing the Tsukihime remake visual novel. Well, there's also a fighting game there's a long historical fighting game series based on Tsukihime, the visual novel series from Type Moon, and the fighting game series is called Melty Blood. It originally was a doujin, or basically an independently made and produced game by the studio French Bread in Japan. And it's long been a very sort of acclaimed cult fighting game, both in Japan and in the West, and it basically just takes the main characters from the Tsukihime visual novel and then makes an anime fighter out of them. And then there's a whole series of games in the Melty Blood line in Japan. Eventually they added in new characters. Eventually some of those new characters made their way back into Fate Grand Order and shit, which I did not realize until I started looking at Melty Blood videos. It's like, oh my god, that character's from this game? Weird. But anyways, eventually they made a game that came out last year, and this came out in the West as well, even though the visual novel's not out here, because fighting games are a lot easier to localize. It's called Melty Blood Type Lumina, and it's interesting because it specifically is set in the remake's timeline, because the remake version of the visual novel is a totally different timeline. It's set in modern day rather than the early 2000s, and some of the specific events and characters and stuff are different. And so when they were making the remake, Type Moon worked with French Bread to say, hey, let's bring Melty Blood back, but let's tie it in with our new remake stuff. And they did, and I've played some of that game, and it is fucking awesome. It is so cool. It also comes with a bunch of free DLC characters, including Saber Jonathan. So, if you wanted to play Saber in a fighting game, she's in here. There's a bunch of Fate Grand Order characters as well, like MASH and Ushiwakamaru. And the Count of Monte Cristo is in this game, which is a great thing to be able to say, hey, if you want to play an anime fighter that has the Count of Monte Cristo in it, you could pick up Melty Blood Type Lumina. If you know about the Fate series, you maybe understand how that could possibly be a thing. If you don't know anything about the Fate series, you would have no idea how the fuck is the Count of Monte Cristo in here. But it is the Count of Monte Cristo. And all the DLC just comes packaged with it, which is awesome. But yeah, it's just if you like an anime fighters, kind of like in the vein of Dragon Ball Fighters, but not with the tag system. It's just a one-on-one game. But it plays very similarly. It's super fast. It has really nice feeling combos, and it's basic combos are very easy to mash out. So even if you're not a very good fighting game player like me, you can still have a lot of fun with it. And in particular, it's really fun because it's still a pixel game. So it's 2D pixels. It's not a 3D fighter. It's not a ArcSys thing, which I love the way the ArcSys games work with their 3D models that they designed to look like their 2D anime stuff. But there is something really nice about just playing a modern fighting game on modern systems that still is keeping the 2D pixel animation tradition alive. And some of the most fun I've had with the game, and honestly the most time I've spent on the game so far, is just going into the training mode with all the characters and just looking at all their animations and just seeing what does their standing medium punch, what does their low kick look like? Because all the characters have so many cool moves, and there's so much detail in the animation, and the pixel art is incredible. In particular, there's a character called Neko Arc, or basically Cat Arc, which is a sort of gag character from Tsukihime, who's also kind of a mascot character for Type Moon. And she's just a completely insane, bonkers character that breaks all the rules of the game. She's 5 inches tall or something ridiculous. She goes up to the knees of most characters. And every single attack she has is some sort of reference or some sort of dumb gag. And it's fucking great. So yeah, I have not put a huge amount of time into it. It's just a thing every once in a while I'll load up it and then go through some of the story mode stuff, or just mess around in the training mode. But if you're like me and you're getting to some of this Type Moon stuff, or you just want to play a kind of very fast, fun anime fighter, Melty Blood Type Lumina is fucking great.
That's awesome. I am looking at the store page for this on the Nintendo Switch, and it does feel like they are cutting us and rubbing salt in the wound with stuff like, explore an all-new Melty Blood world from Kinoko Nasu, based on the events of Tsukihime, A Piece of Blue Glass Moon, a game that is not available to buy in your region. But I do kind of wonder, Sean, with this and with Witch on the Holy Night, it sure feels like reading the tea leaves, they have a plan here, right? Like, I don't know.
So.
It would be so weird to do those two and then not Tsukihime, because Witch on the Holy Night is also like tied into the Tsukihime remake timeline and all that. So like, they need to do this. They need to bring it over.
Yes, because one of the DLC characters is Aozaki Aoko. It's like modern day version of her,
right.
But she's probably, of the characters I've played, she's the main character from Witch on the Holy Night, for people who don't know, who also is the sort of teacher of the main character, Tsukihime. She is the most fun character to play, because she basically, her whole thing is that she more or less shoots lasers. It's magic, but it's like shooting lasers from her hands, more or less. And she's ridiculous. And I love her Tsukihime design, where she is just wearing basically like jeans and a fucking white t-shirt. And she's just like, I don't give a fuck. Like, she has no pretensions about anything. She's just having a fun time. She's just traveling the world, getting into magical adventures. And she's very kind of like punk rock, which is set up a little bit in Witch on the Holy Night. And she's an incredibly fun character to play. But yeah, one of the things that's funny about the game is that since it's set in the remake timeline, there's a whole set of characters who are major characters that they have to have in the game, like Akiho's the main character's little sister, and the maids Hisui and Kohaku, who are the heroines of the second half of the game that they have not yet put into the remake yet. And so it's very funny to play the characters who are in the remake and seeing, oh, every move they have is some sort of reference to a fight from the remake or something. And then you go to the characters that haven't been in it, and it's like they have to either just sort of put a couple of things in that are technically spoilers if you don't know the original Tsukihime story, that you're like, oh, well, this is why she has this power, even though you haven't actually seen it in the visual novel yet. Or a lot of it, they're just kind of like making shit up. But there's something that's very fun about that they, none of those characters are in fights in the visual novel. So they have nothing to pull from the remake. So they just kind of have to come up with a bunch of shit. And so those characters end up being kind of goofy, but in a way that's very fun. And then there's a bunch of brand new characters that were only in the remake that they've completely invented, that if you are fans of old Melty Blood games, are brand new characters to this fighting game. And yeah, so it's super fun. And I do hope that remake visual novel comes over here. Obviously, again, that is a much harder thing to localize than this fighting game, where there's a decent amount of text with the story mode, but it's got to be like less than 1% the quantity of text you'd have to translate if you're bringing Tsukihime remake over, which is like a 70, 80 hour long visual novel. I get why those are hard things to, localize, but they really should, because it's really fucking good. And I think it has more than enough of a fan base over here that it would be successful.
Well, yeah, and we know they can do it now from Witch on the Holy Night. They can do it well, so we should be excited for that hopefully happening.
Yes. So that's one thing I've been picking away at. Something that I have played and completed is I booted up my Xbox Series S for the first time in literally a full calendar year. That guy was just kind of sitting down there. I hadn't found anything really to do with him since, I think, Halo Infinite. I think the last time I booted it up was like last January, when I was like, is Halo Infinite still worth playing? And the answer at that point was still no. And then I have not booted it up since then. But I booted it up because I wanted to play the new character action game Hi-Fi Rush by Tango Gameworks. A very unusual game from that studio, because they've only made Evil Within 1, 2, and Ghostwire Tokyo. This is the studio that Shinji Mikami started after he left Capcom, and then he kind of bounced around a couple places, and then he made this studio. Shinji Mikami has also since actually retired from the studio, kind of seemingly lead it, which I think was always his plan, that he wanted to kind of build up a studio and kind of mentor a couple people like the director of this game, John Johannes. But yeah, Hi-Fi Rush is a big character action game. This was kind of shadow dropped at that Microsoft event that was a couple of months ago at this point. and it's really fucking good. If you like games like Devil May Cry, this is, I think, an absolute must play. It is a great, great character action game that's also fun because it's a little bit smaller scale. I want to say it's $30 if you just buy it. Obviously, it's on Game Pass. That's how I played it, is I just signed up for a month of Game Pass. And it's maybe about a 10-hour long game if you just do one playthrough, so it's easy to do in the amount of time you'd have with a Game Pass month. And it's very much in the style of kind of classic character action games, with one major twist being that it has this whole rhythm game element put on top of it. So the setting of Hi-Fi Rush is kind of the Saturday morning cartoon world that is very fun and very vibrant. The graphics are incredible in terms of how they bring to life that whole aesthetic. It's easily the most impressive use of like cell shading techniques in a video game I've seen. It replicates that look of a Saturday morning cartoon. Even though it's made in Japan, this definitely feels like it's meant to look like an American cartoon that is inspired by anime more than it's meant to look like an anime in and of itself. And the main character of the game, Chai, is basically sort of taken in by this big, crazy mega corporation. This kind of has a dystopian world setting where there's this mega corporation that is sort of taking people and putting robotic prosthetics and stuff on them and then turning them into workers. And then eventually you learn that they're trying to like basically mind control people and turn them into slaves. But in the process where Chai is getting his sort of robotic arm attached to him, that he's then going to be like a trash collector or something, he's going to have this magnetic arm, something goes wrong and he has this iPod infused into his body, which then gives him magical music-based powers, so that he becomes really powerful, is able to do everything on the beat, and the world is now playing this music. And so in gameplay mechanics, what that means is that there's this sort of driving beat that plays throughout the level, and all of your attacks and all the enemy attacks happen on the beat, basically on the quarter notes. Or all of your light attacks happen on quarter notes, all of your heavy attacks happen on half notes. And so that happens no matter what. Like if you press the button, let's say like on the eighth note, that would be between the quarter notes, your attack will just be a little bit slower and will still land on the quarter note. So the whole dynamic, the additional dynamic of the combat that's layered on top of the normal sort of light, heavy combo type stuff you would get in a Devil May Cry, is this sense that you're meant to be hitting the buttons on the beat that makes your attacks go out faster. It means you get more damage. There's certain attacks and things that have additional effects if you do it on the beat, like the dodge. You can dodge 3 times in a row if you hit it on the beat right. And so it's a really interesting way to sort of build this other kind of layer to what is a very classic style character action combat system. Like if you played any character action game, you will know exactly how this plays in the fundamentals. This adds this sort of unique twist on top of it. But one thing that I really like is that it's not a really overbearing. It's not a thing where you have to be thinking about it constantly, because I think I started to get a lot better at the combat when I realized I shouldn't be focusing on hitting on the beat. I should try to let that just be a thing that is happening more naturally in the back of my head. And I'm still thinking actively about my sort of combos and spacing and stuff like that, like I would with a Devil May Cry. But I'm sort of trying to get with that rhythm and sort of subconsciously play that way. And it does create a really nice mix where it's a really solid character action game on all of its own merits, but when you are able to play on the beat and sort of combine some of those things with it, it gives it a very unique flavor and just a really fun, happy, kind of peppy tone that matches so well the cartoon aesthetic and the very kind of power friendship style story that they tell. The story is not like, it's not The Last of Us or something. It's not trying to be like big and in your face, but it is really well done. I think all the characters are very interesting. They're very well done. The voice acting is fantastic. This is a game that, even though it's made by a Japanese studio, I'd strongly recommend playing with the English voice acting, because it was clearly designed kind of like a Resident Evil or Devil May Cry. It was designed for the English voice acting first, and it's really, really good. And there's a very simple story about like found family and friendship at the heart of the game that is like really earnest and very well done. And I think it is one of those things that helps elevate the game even more. If the story was bad or forgettable, it wouldn't hurt the game that much, but the characters being really fun and the story actually landing quite well does add, like, it really pushes the game even higher, to be one that I think people really should. Even I think if you aren't usually into character action games, I think this is one worth checking out, because there's enough of a novelty to it. And it's got enough of a kind of like carefree attitude to it that I think, you know, it's not very strict, I guess, as a character action game. It's not like Ninja Gaiden or something. So I think even if you're not super into the genre normally, if you've got Game Pass or you're interested in getting Game Pass, it's a game worth checking out and seeing if you vibe with, because if you do, it's really fucking cool.
That's awesome. I've been very excited to play this. I haven't quite played it yet. I've just had a lot of other stuff that I've been playing through and work on my plate and whatnot. But I did put it on my Xbox. It's out there. It's ready to play. I will play it soon, and that sounds awesome. My character action reference is more Bayonetta than Devil May Cry, but they're both those are
yes.
two sides of the same coin. And this sounds like it's got that in its DNA as well, obviously. So this is awesome. I think it's cool it exists. That's one of the coolest. I mean, it's definitely the coolest Xbox exclusive of this generation so far. It's also the first. Not literally, but effectively. It's definitely the first I feel like people have talked about, right? Like, that's like broken out in terms of in the Series S era.
And it is next-gen exclusive. It's not on the Xbox One. So in that sense, I think it maybe is the first game they've put out that is next-gen exclusive.
Because this is Bethesda, through the corporate grapevine, it's Bethesda owns ZeniMax, which owns Tango Gameworks, and so it is technically in that like corporate family, because I know they did some third-party stuff that was technically exclusive, but yeah, this is from the Xbox suite of developers, so more like this Xbox. This is cool.
Yes, this is very cool. One thing I will say is, like, it isn't a perfect game, you know, so I don't want to get people's, like, I wouldn't necessarily go, because I do think I was a little bit overhyped on the game, and I think I was a little bit disappointed by it in probably the first half or so, because I think I saw such effusive praise. I would say, like, to caution people, the game is much better in the back half than it is in the first. I think if I have a criticism of the game, it's that it's too slow and that the pacing is a little bit off, because the first half of the game, there's too much of the platforming stuff, which is fine, but it's not great. It's a character action game, right? So it's like the platforming stuff is there to give you something different you're doing between the action segments. But it's not in depth enough that you want to do long sections where you're doing double jumps and some environmental puzzles. And there's like a grappling hook thing, which is fine. But it's not the strength of the game. The strength of the game is the combat. And in the back half, there's a much higher frequency of combat encounters, and they do a lot more with the combat. And so in the back half of the game, it's really firing on all cylinders. But it is a thing where it's a little bit slow to start. And I do think the character movement speed is one of the reasons why the platforming stuff feels a little bit bad, is that the character movement speed is too slow. It feels well designed for when you're in combat scenarios, it's fine. But when you're spending too much time exploring levels, it's too slow. So I think that would be one thing, that's my one criticism of the game, is that the pacing's a little off in that first half, where it feels like they needed to put more combat in there, probably a little bit more enemy variety earlier on in the game to really like make that more fresh. But then once you get to the back half, like the back half of the game is so strong that it makes that, I think I understood why people don't bring that complaint up that much, is because once you get to the back half is so good, you kind of forget that was what the first half felt like at the time.
I think that's also very common of character action games, that the first one has some rough edges. This game will probably have an absolutely amazing sequel.
Yes.
That is often what happens with this kind of game. So,
yeah,
I know Devil May Cry 2 is not that, but Devil May Cry 3 is,
Yes. Yeah, this feels like it's waiting to have a Devil May Cry 3, because kind of like that, this only has one real weapon that the main character uses, which is fine. And Devil May Cry 1, I guess, also does have two weapons technically, but the second one is bad. So this kind of feels like that, where they really sort of, they're trying out these mechanics, they're trying out some of these systems, and it's a little bit limited in some ways. But it does feel like it's setting itself up to have like a really killer, awesome sequel. Like the story does resolve itself completely. It's not putting in any sequel hooks, but this kind of thing, it would be very easy to see, oh, here's another evil corporation or some other bad guy pops up, and Chai and the gang have to get back together and, get his old weird junk guitar and start beating the shit out of people.
This time, instead of an iPod in his chest, it's a Microsoft Zune.
Yes.
Ooh.
You know, it's technically it's non-branded in this game. It would be funny if, because they're owned by Microsoft now, that's like they're like, no, you got to bring the Zune brand, got to put a Zune in his chest. Actually, one thing I remember talking about the game just now, one thing that, this isn't a criticism or like a compliment or whatever, it just is a weird thing about the game, is that, like, I'm pretty sure that you are actually killing the bosses, or most of the bosses in this game. I think you're actually killing them. It feels like they're like, there should be a sort of cartoon, look, I can see their parachutes type line in there that doesn't get played, because most of the bosses, when you beat them, they kind of like explode in a cartoonish way, but then they're just gone. It's not a thing of where they're knocked unconscious or you capture them. It's just like, oh, that woman's just not there anymore. Or this woman got hit and like she got launched and turned into like a twinkling star, like Team Rocket or something. But there's no cutscene at the end where you see them all and they're in jail or something. They're just, as far as I could tell, you just fucking murder like 4 people in this game, and Chai just kind of beats people to death with his guitar and they explode and he walks away and never thinks about it again, which is particularly disturbing when... this is a minor spoiler for the plot, but it's like kind of whatever. The last boss in the game is the older brother of one of the supporting cast. And that dude, as far as I can tell, is fucking dead at the end of the game. Like, he doesn't show up again after he explodes off screen. And it's like, nobody like that, Peppermint, the sort of female lead of the game, never brings up the fact that they just, as far as I can tell, killed her older brother. He was a dick. He was a bad guy, but it's a lot that you are basically going around killing these people. And Chai has a bit of a body count on his hands at the end of this game.
Well, maybe that is the sequel, is one of the like family members of one of the people you killed comes back for revenge, a la every Fast and Furious movie of the last 10 years.
Oh, I was thinking of like the beginning of Last of Us Part 2.
That's a very different reference.
And that's like in Hi-Fi Rush 2, it's Peppermint, the female lead, has to go around and get revenge and go on a vengeance quest after Chai gets brutally murdered at the beginning of Hi-Fi Rush 2. That would be fucking a real big tonal shift for this series if they went there.
But you know what? It would make a great HBO show.
It would, yeah. They're just setting themselves up for that, prestige TV adaptation.
Yeah, everyone's going to be running after that. All right, I've been playing one new game, but I'm not far in enough on it to say a ton about it yet, but I have been playing Octopath Traveler 2, the second... Why do I have to explain that? Of course, it's the second Octopath Traveler game. But obviously, this is I think of this broadly as the like Team Asano games, because that's the producer, and this is Bravely Default, this is Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, and now Octopath Traveler 2. I've enjoyed a lot of these. This one so far is fantastic. I'm not deep enough into it to where I've necessarily seen how different it is from the first one, and I know it does branch out more. It just is extremely well done. It definitely feels like this is one of those kind of leap sequels where you have a very solid first game, but then the second one is the one that makes it great, a la Mass Effect 2 or Assassin's Creed 2 or something like that. I think this feels like it's in that camp. It has an absolutely stunning soundtrack. The first one had a great soundtrack as well, but this one I think just takes it to another level. It's really astonishing to listen to. The voice acting in this game is off the charts in Japanese. I don't know about in English. And because Sean just recommended that you all play Hi-Fi Rush in Japanese, you do not get to text me this time and say, why don't you guys ever play games in English? Yeah, he just did. Stop getting in my mentions about that. But Octopath Traveler 2 has an amazing Japanese cast, Sean, including Mr. Joji Nakata, who we've been talking about a bunch on this season of Japanimation Station as one of the main characters. His first line in the game is about finding the kongen, the root. It's intentional. They know what
you
they're
shared
doing.
that on Twitter, and I listened to that clip. And yes, it has got to be an intentional reference to his character from Fate Stay Night, because it is written like a speech that he would give. It's pretty great.
So if you want a JRPG where you get to go around and hear Joji Nakata say things in battles and in cutscenes. This is the game for you. It's also got Akira Ishida. It has Kazuya Nakai. I have not met his character yet, but I know he's coming up. I just met the character played by Rie Tanaka. She's great. Aya Hirano plays Oshette, which is the little like wolf girl. Well, she's not really a wolf, but she like is a hunter on this animal island. And I started out with her. But yeah, the cast is amazing. The writing is very good so far, and I think the different stories are more varied than they were in Octopath Traveler 1. And overall, like, all the good things about that game are here as well. It's at the outset, the structure is similar, where you have these 8 stories and you pick wherever you want to start. So they basically have a description of every character and you pick which one sounds, I guess, most interesting to you. And you start there and then you go explore the world. And as you explore the world, you find the other 7 protagonists and you don't miss any narrative content. When you find someone, you get to go back and do their prologue section and everything. And then you have your party going around. I think this game has even more interesting side content. Like, it's just really fun to go around towns because of the different abilities all the party members have. There's all sorts of ways you can interact with people in towns, from pickpocketing and mugging them to like just like discerning. The Joji Nakata character is a scholar who can like discern things about people, and it's kind of like the Metroid Prime scanning thing where you like talk to someone and then you have their life story and you can like read about them, and there's very interesting flavor text around that. The battle system is, I think, pretty similar to what it was. The Octopath Traveler 1 is like 4 or 5 years old now, so it's not entirely fresh in my memory, but I think this is basically what it was last time. It's still very good. It's like a solid challenge, but it's not crazy. And everything this is a JRPG that does label everything for you. So every area is like, hey, this is a level 20 area, be careful. And that is nice. You're not going to walk in and like get wiped without knowing it. But yeah, it's beautiful so far. Obviously, the HD 2D style that they have innovated for these games. They also used it in Triangle Strategy, and the Live Alive remake is absolutely gorgeous. Octopath Traveler 2, I think, takes it up to another level. The lighting in this game is just stunning. And yeah, it's really beautiful so far. I'm very much enjoying it. I've played about 10 hours. I've gotten 4 of the 8 main characters. So I have quite a ways to go, and I will talk about it more in the future. But I do have to say, Sean, this is a game. It's not a Switch exclusive this time. It is also on Windows, and it is on PS5 and PS4. I would definitely recommend this. I think you would like this specifically, Sean. I think it is a classic JRPG, obviously in its influences, but it feels very modern in a bunch of other ways, and it's just got that absolutely killer A-list cast. It's so good.
Yeah, this is definitely on my list. Like, there's a lot of games out right now that I want to play.
Yes.
So it's like so far this is a very different year for video games for me than last year was. Where last year it was, I felt like for games that I was personally interested in, I had to like really, there was not a lot out there. This year it's like, because there's the Dead Space remake that I want to play. Wo Long Fallen Dynasty just came out. There's a game I'm going to talk about in a second that I'm playing. And then there's this that I want to play. And then obviously there's still stuff that's going to come out in the couple months that I really want to play. But yes, this, like, I've read some reviews about it. It seems like people's general impression sounds like it fixes some of the issues that people had with the first game that kind of made me, I mean, obviously that first game was a Switch game anyway, so I wouldn't have been able to play it, but it also, I didn't feel compelled to want to seek it out in any way, partially because that complaint about the stories being really separate or something, there's something about the way that some of the reviews for that game, it just sort of drove me away a little bit, whereas people talking about, with this one, it sounds like they do more to make the characters in the party feel interconnected, and kind of fix that complaint. And then the way I've seen, particularly I've read some of Jason Schreier writing about it, and he has like said some really glowing stuff about the game that makes me really interested in it. As well as like seeing that voice cast also helps, because it is like every single character is played by a voice actor I know and like a lot. One weird thing about the platforms, just because I was looking at this, is that it's not coming out, or it is not at least currently out on Xbox One, which is weird, because Octopath Traveler 1 eventually did come to Xbox but never came to PlayStation. So I do not know what's going on at Square Enix, who is deciding which platforms these Octopath Traveler games are coming out on. Because the first game came out on Switch, then later came out on Windows, then it came out on Stadia, and then it came out on Xbox One, and then this one launched on Switch, PS4, PS5, and Windows all on launch day, which is weird.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and it is funny. Like, just to note for people who are not in the know, you do not have to have played the first one. This is not that. This is a JRPG sequel, so it is a completely new world and characters. Right. So it's not like PlayStation owners are going to be lost in that sense. I do wonder if it's like it didn't sell it all on Xbox, and so they're like, we'll put it on the platform where people actually play Japanese games, and that is the PlayStation. But we'll see. I'm glad it is on more platforms because it makes it easier to recommend, and it is fantastic. So I do highly recommend this one. I would love to talk about it with you, Sean, later this year. So yeah, keep it on your radar, and I will talk more about it in the weeks to come as I get to play more of this so far delightful game.
Awesome. Well, I have also been playing a delightful game that I am certainly not done with yet, but Like a Dragon Ishin, or Yakuza Ishin if you want to call it that, or Ryuga Gotoku Ishin, whichever title you'd want to refer to it by. This is the remake of... I'll talk about what it means to be a remake for this game, because it's a little bit different than some of the others, but effectively it's a remake of the previously Japanese-only Ryuga Gotoku Ishin, which is the Meiji Japanese like samurai era set Yakuza game that came out on PS3 and the PS4 back in the day in Japan. Basically, it was a launch game on the PS4 and never made its way over here. But now the Yakuza series / the Like a Dragon series is so popular worldwide that they have made a remake and it has come out worldwide. As a remake, what that really means, this is not a Kiwami thing. It's not like Yakuza Kiwami or Yakuza Kiwami 2, which were full, proper, like, complete remakes of the game. This is more like it is technically a remake because it is on a different engine, but it's more like they ported the game to Unreal Engine 4 in their process of sort of bringing it to other platforms. So it is not on their... Well, it was never on the Dragon engine, but it's not on whatever engine they used that was like the Yakuza 3450 engine of games, but it plays like one of those. And it generally looks like one of those. There are some graphical upgrades here and there, but at its roots, this is effectively a PS3 game, so people should keep their expectations in check. Like, go into this expecting it to look like Yakuza 0 and play generally like Yakuza 0, obviously with, like, samurai stuff instead of just, like, brawling or whatever. But it is fundamentally a Yakuza game from that era that they have ported to the Unreal Engine 4, and that side of it feels like this is their, like, studio experimenting with trying to use Unreal Engine rather than their own proprietary stuff. And so there are a couple of technical rough edges on this game that feel like they come from a studio trying to get a handle on a new engine, specifically like on some, like, when you like cut to a totally different scene when you're doing like a side quest or something, it's not a pre-rendered video, you definitely get your kind of Unreal Engine-y. There's a couple of frames where you see the scene load in and then it kind of all snaps into place and then the actual cutscene starts. There's a couple things like that feel like the studio has not fully understood like how to make the best use of Unreal Engine 4. But other than that, you would never really notice that this is not just a normal, straightforward port of a PS3 / PS4 game like Yakuza 0. Anyways, all that aside, what this game is at its root is a sort of classic style Yakuza game. It's, you know, running around a city, brawling and all that kind of stuff. What makes it very different is that it is set in the Meiji era Japan. And the story so far, I'm at chapter 5, so I'm still fairly early in the main story, but it is really fucking cool. If you know anything about this period of Japanese history, they do some really interesting things with it, where this is when there's effectively a Japanese civil war called the Boshin War, that is between the Tokugawa shogunate, which is the reigning power in Japan at the time, and then this like kind of revolutionary faction called the Imperial Loyalists that are trying to overthrow the Tokugawa shogunate and put the imperial family back into power, because the imperial family at that time, like with most Japanese history, was effectively like a figurehead more than an actual ruling party. But they wanted them to be that so that they could revolutionize the government and stuff like that. And so it is using all like actual historical characters. Obviously, it is playing with that history because the main character, Sakamoto Ryoma, who's effectively played by Kiryu, the main character from the Yakuza series. It's the same voice actor. It's the same basic character model. It's basically the same characterization. That is true of all the characters. It feels like your favorite characters from the Yakuza games have dressed up in samurai costume and are doing a samurai movie for you. It's kind of what it feels like, which is awesome. But Sakamoto Ryoma, the main character, is a real historical figure. He was one of the most important figures on the Imperial Loyalist side, who like brokered an important treaty that allowed the Loyalists to get a lot more sort of military and political power to help overthrow the Tokugawa shogunate. And Sakamoto Daima also was very famously assassinated. It's like a really famous incident in this period of Japanese history. It's assassinated probably by the Shinsengumi, which were a military police faction working for the Tokugawa shogunate. Well, the thing that this game does is early on, Roma's sort of father figure is killed, and Roma is trying to track down the killer. And in order to do so, he takes over this alias of Hajime Saito, and then eventually he learns that the Shinsengumi, that military police faction, is probably responsible for the assassination. So he decides to infiltrate the Shinsengumi. And Hajime Saito is also a real historical person who was the third captain of, or like the captain of the third squad of the Shinsengumi. So the thing, like the sort of historical fiction story this is telling is, what if Sakamoto Daima and Hajime Saito were the same person and he was operating under an alias? And that the game in the opening cutscene sort of sets up this idea that the real Sakamoto Daima was never assassinated, and that somebody else was assassinated in his place, and he continued to work behind the scenes as basically a double agent, because also Hajime Saito is the only major Shinsengumi member in actual history to have survived that war, and eventually works for the government that was put in place by the Imperial Loyalists. So it's like a fun historical fiction. If you know the setting, it's a fun what-if story that sort of throws these kind of historical figures together and does this cool kind of intrigue story with it, that then on top of that, it's all your favorite Yakuza people together, and that side of it is fantastic. There is a scene where you see all the captains of the Shinsengumi together, which is the most Yakuza scene Yakuza game scene ever. Every Yakuza game has a scene in it early on where you see the like head of the Tojo family or something, and all the heads of the different families come together in some big meeting and all shout at each other and do their Yakuza shit. And it's basically that exact scene, but it's all the Shinsengumi members, and they're all played by villains from the other Yakuza games, and then also Majima is there, and Saejima for Yakuza 4 and 5 is there. And it's like it's just fucking incredible. It's so good to see all these characters, many of whom died in the one Yakuza game they appeared in, get kind of resurrected in this crazy samurai drama, and basically just do Yakuza shit together, but with, they're all just kind of talking old school Japanese. So if you have any fondness for those kinds of samurai movies, this historical period, the Yakuza franchise, the story stuff so far is like a complete dream come true for me on that front. And that side of it is awesome. But also I have been mostly just doing all the side shit, because there's this whole side story where you have old Japan era Haruka, who is Kiryu's adoptive daughter in the original series. In this, Ryoma adopts this girl, basically Haruka, because her family died and left her all this debt. And instead of having her go work at a brothel or something to make off that debt, he sort of says, okay, I'll buy your house and I'll work with you to work off this debt. And like, it will run this farm. So there's this whole mini game thing where you're like running this farm and going and trying to getting all these upgrades to make the farm better. And you're finding like cats and dogs and helping them so you can bring them back to your farm and they do stuff for you. And it's this whole big thing. And I spent all of yesterday, which was Saturday, the only thing I did was run around and did side quests and made my farm better and hang out with Haruka. And there's like an event where she like cleans your ears or whatever, and you talk about how you're both orphans and all this shit. It like the main story stuff is awesome, but this is also one of my favorite like kind of side story mini quest things I've seen in one of these games. Having it all focus on Haruka, I think, is a very smart move, because there's not really a spot for her in the main story. So instead, they created a whole little side world where you just kind of go off to this farm and work with her and like, the main story is whatever. I just want to hang out with Haruka and make her happy and pay off her debt. So that's the main thing I've been doing so far. But yeah, if you are the kind of person where you will know whether or not this game is for you, and if you know if this game is for you, you should play it, because it's fucking great.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. It does sound like one that maybe is more rewarding if you've played past Yakuza games, just to know the characters. So it's not one that probably I will jump into right away, because someday I still need to make my pilgrimage through Yakuza's 0 through 6.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, unless you're someone who's really interested in the historical period and that's like a big attraction to you, that would be maybe a reason to start with this one. But if you're not already in that world, I would go start with Yakuza 0, or like I would just go start with Yakuza 0, because that's the best starting point. But yeah, definitely it would be a weird game to be your first Yakuza / Like a Dragon game, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Yakuza 7 is nice for newcomers, but those characters aren't in this one, so yeah. But anyway, there's plenty of Yakuza if you want to go find it. There's lots of these now. But no, that's cool, and I'm glad it's out here now, because I know you've wanted to play this forever. I feel like we probably first mentioned this on the podcast back in like 2016 when Yakuza 0 was out and you were getting into these games. I remember you telling us about how this was. I mean, it was pretty new at that time in Japan, and you were like, oh, I hope they bring that over. And they did eventually, just 10 years later.
Yes. Yeah, because I actually own the Japanese version of this game. I eventually bought it when it was on sale on the Japanese PSN and never got around to playing it because it's a lot of Japanese text to work through. But I'm glad that they just put it out over here because it's a lot easier to play these games in English. They're very dense. There's all those sub-stories. It would take a long time to read through all that stuff.
Yeah. Is there karaoke in this one somehow?
Yes, it's so good.
God.
It's a singing bar is what they call it, and it's more like what American karaoke is, where it's not like a little, you don't like pay someone money, you go into a little booth. It's like a big open tavern kind of looking setting, and there's this stage, and it's all live accompaniment. So you have all these people with like shamisen and shit like that sitting up on the stage, and you get up there and sing, and it's fucking great. There is of course the song, the kind of classic Yakuza karaoke song Baka Mitai, which is in all of the games, is in here, but it's like with classical Japanese instrumentation instead, which is great. They include the line "I love you" in English in that song, which I was kind of curious if they would or not, because it makes no sense that he would suddenly be saying something in English. But yes, no, that the karaoke's there. They do like sort of get some of your classic Yakuza stuff. They find a way to work it into the setting in a way that's very fun. And then they do also have just a lot of fun with the setting, with the sub-stories. Like one of the sub-stories I really enjoyed was one where a teacher stops you and asks you to help him teach his class about geography because he has a globe and he doesn't know like where anything is on the globe. And so it gives you a quiz where it shows you this like old Japanese version of a world map, which obviously like all the proportions and shit are totally crazy looking to someone who's used to like what our world map looks like. And they like point out countries and you have to figure out what the country is. And there's a lot of little stuff like that where it's a smart way of using the old school setting. Because the Meiji era is this point where like Japan's borders have more or less forcibly been opened by Commodore Perry when he came with the black ships or whatever. So there's all this stuff about this influx of foreigners and stuff and the pressure they're putting on the Tokugawa shogunate, which is one of the reasons why the Meiji Restoration can happen, is because that weakens the shogunate so much. But that then also gives you all these cool storytelling opportunities where you have all this sort of like outside cultural influence coming in and seeing how the characters are reacting to that. One of the styles in the game for combat is you just have a fucking pistol. And then you can also do a thing where you have a pistol in one hand and a sword in the other. You have a whole training thing where like this sort of old West looking gunman who's in Japan is teaching you how to use the pistol better. And there's a lot of shit like that in the game that makes it really fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, this game sounds very cool. So I'm excited to hear more about it from you on future podcasts, because even though I haven't played most of the Yakuza games, I have enjoyed the like secondhand fun of hearing you talk about them, which has been like a 6-year-long thing on this show now. It's great. Yeah. Awesome. One other thing I've been playing is on the Nintendo Switch. I've gotten really into the Game Boy Advance app that they added. I think last time we had a Weekly Stuff podcast, we covered that Nintendo Direct where they announced that they were adding a bunch of stuff, including obviously Metroid Prime Remastered, which I was very excited about. And then they also added Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. And after finishing Metroid Prime Remastered, I had about a week before Octopath Traveler 2 came out, so I didn't want to start anything else too big because I knew I was going to play that. So I just started diving into the Game Boy stuff a lot, and I have to say, the emulation and the overall experience of Game Boy games, both the original but especially the GBA stuff, is, I think, the best job Nintendo's ever done with classic games on their systems. Like, obviously they need to add more games to it, but for what is there now, they look and sound really good. For GBA in particular, some people who are maybe better explaining this than I am because they're more into like retro hardware can like give you the lowdown on this. But in basics, like the color scheme, especially for GBA games, is just much more faithful to how it looked on original Game Boy hardware. And like if I pull out my Game Boy Advance SP and compare it, you do see that. Like there's a little... Colors are a little softer when processed through the LCD screens on old Game Boys than they would be when you just kind of emulate them and don't do anything to like the raw color palettes that get put out. And they've addressed that. I think I don't always go in for the different CRT and scanline filters, not necessarily because I think it's a bad idea. I actually do think, and I've seen a lot of convincing arguments on this, retro games should come with some kind of scanline or CRT filter, because if you're just looking at the raw pixels, you really are not seeing the art as the artist intended it to be. It's kind of like, think of it like grain on films shot on celluloid. Like the images were not made with the expectation that you wouldn't see the grain. And so there's a lot of just like shapes and figures and colors and stuff that don't look right when you don't have the scan lines on. But I've seen better and worse implementations of CRT and scanline filters. The one that is on the Super NES and NES apps on Nintendo Switch, I think is a little too blurry. Like, I think it also tries to add the kind of effect of actually looking at a CRTV where it would have kind of a curve and that sort of thing. And I don't love that. I wish it was a just straight sort of scanline thing. The one that is on the GBA app is the best implementation of this I've ever seen. And I think particularly if you're playing your Switch in handheld and you have that filter on, it just looks so right. It doesn't look distracting. It just looks very natural. And combined with the colors, you know, now you have these GBA games on a much, much, much bigger screen than the original Game Boy Advance, even if you're just playing the Switch handheld, right? The Switch handheld is like a 7-inch screen. The GBA was what, like 1.5, 2 inches? You know, it's much bigger. And you can put it on your TV as well. But on that Switch OLED, those GBA games look so good. So I've played through most of Mario Advance 4, which is Mario Bros. 3. And that is the best version of Mario Bros. 3. If you've never played that one, it is substantially based on the Super Mario All-Stars version of Mario 3, but with a lot of new animations and enhancements beyond that. And just like the color work in that game, the pixel art, the animations on Mario and Luigi and everyone else is so gorgeous. I found myself falling in love with Mario 3 all over again. That is probably my favorite 2D Mario game. It is so, so good. And it plays so well in this format. I love the GBA version also has all the e-reader levels and all of that stuff. So it's a really fun version of the game. I think it's the best looking version of the game. And obviously plays really well in this emulation format. And just seeing it with kind of the GBA accurate colors, with the scan lines on there to really make the pixel art stand out, it was really jaw-dropping. And then I also played through all of The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because that is one of the ones that's on the service now. And it's one of the... I'm getting close, Sean. I've only got a couple more Zeldas before I can say I've played all of these. Because the only other ones, now that I've played Minish Cap, I know it's Oracle of Ages and Seasons, which are going to come to Switch soon. I've never played those. And the only 3D I've never beaten is Skyward Sword, which I have on Switch. I kind of bounced off it. I'll try it again one day. But
well,
those
then,
are
of course, you got to get your Philips CDI emulator and play,
Yes.
Wand of Gamelon and the other masterpieces on that great system.
This is the debate. Do those count as Zelda games?
Yes.
Okay.
You can't just say no because they're bad. I mean, they're Legend of Zelda games through and through.
And I have not ever played to completion the old NES ones, but maybe one day. Anyway, but Minish Cap, I do generally love the 2D Zelda games, and this one is no exception. I think this game has some issues, and I'll talk about that in a second, because it is probably my least favorite of the 2D Zeldas I've played, but I still really liked it. I'm glad it's on this service. It was the big original Zelda for GBA, so it makes sense that they put it on there. But the main thing is, like, if you want to see what I'm talking about with how good GBA games look on Switch, play this, because Minish Cap, now that I've played it, that has to be the best looking GBA game. It looks extraordinary, and I played a lot of GBA games back in the day. This is one I never played as a kid, but I played it now, and it looks like, basically, the best way I could describe it is like if we got a Sega Saturn Zelda game, like where you had like 32-bit 2D Zelda, where you have that. It's kind of like we've talked about this before, Sean, with like 90s eras fighting games where they're still 2D, but you have just a crazy number of frames of animation. Mm-hmm. That's the Minish Cap. Like, it's really striking. You have so many detailed animations for Link in particular, but also for the Minish Cap itself, for the hat you're wearing throughout the game, the character Eslo, and then other characters in the game. It's just an extremely lively game. I think it has a gorgeous color design. The world is basically, it's like a Link to the Past filtered through the design aesthetics of the Wind Waker in 2D, and so it's a really beautiful combination of influences. It looks phenomenal on this system. They have a lot of the whole thing about the Minish Cap, the gimmick of this game is that Link can shrink down, sort of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style, and so you have a lot of areas where you are small, mini Link, but everything looks big, so like an acorn towers over you or something, and those look particularly gorgeous. It is just an absolute kind of aesthetic marvel. I think it's easily the best looking 2D Zelda game, even counting something like A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS. I think this is like aesthetically an even more interesting game. And so all of that is really cool to play here on the Switch. Makes me excited for some other stuff, like we are getting Metroid Fusion this week, actually, and that'll look great. I hope we get Zero Mission. That's another of the best looking GBA games. But yeah, overall, though, this is a cool game. It's one of the Capcom games. Capcom did this, and it did the Oracle games, and that's actually where Hidemaru Fujibayashi, who later directed Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom, that's where he got his start, was on these games. He directed the Capcom handheld games. So overall, I think he's directed like 7 Legend of Zelda games. He did the 3 Capcom games. He did 4 Swords on the GBA. He did Skyward Sword and then both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. So he has directed like half of the Zelda series at this point, which is kind of funny. But this one is very much in the portable Zelda pantheon in that it is weird and it is silly, and I love that about it. It is not quite out there as like Link's Awakening or Majora's Mask, but it's on that end of things where characters are more eccentric and the world is a little livelier and sillier, and I really love that about it. The Minish mechanics, I think, are super cool. They make for some really great environmental puzzles and exploration. There's this other system called the Kinstone system where you find these little like broken medallions in the world, and there is one of the few buttons on the GBA. The L button is dedicated at all times to going up to people and seeing if they have Kinstones to match with, and then things get unlocked in the world. All of that together means there's sort of more ways to explore the world and solve puzzles than in really any other traditional Zelda that I've played, and that's really cool. I think the downside is that there just isn't enough reward for doing all that exploration, because this is also very traditional Zelda in that there are heart pieces and there are rupees, and in this one there are also more Kinstone pieces to find, but there's not a bunch of other stuff. I think this is one place where Zelda, to me, has always fallen short of something like Metroid, which has your missile upgrades, and it has all the abilities, and it has your energy tanks, and so exploration is constantly giving you stuff that not only is fun to find, but that you will go use. I think Minish Cap just doesn't have enough of that, and so too many things with the Kinstone thing is very fun in theory, but a lot of what you find through Kinstone exploration is more Kinstone pieces that you will then never use because you've already had enough to find it. And I think that is a weird thing. Like the final dungeon in the game, that when you beat, the game ends, has Kinstone pieces in it. And that's absolutely bizarre because there's nowhere to use those at this point. So some of that I think is a bummer because, again, the exploration is so fun in theory. The dungeons are good. I don't think they're ever quite great. The last few are way over long. There's even a line in the 5th dungeon where Eslo, the person in your hat, jokes like, "Man, this is going on forever, Link." And I'm like, "Yes, Eslo, it is going on forever. This is a very long dungeon." And I think there's kind of, you can separate Zelda games into the ones where the world is more interesting than the dungeons. I would say this is that. I think Majora's Mask is that. There's ones where the dungeons are more interesting than the world. I think that's Twilight Princess. And then there's the Goldilocks just right in the middle, and that's like Ocarina of Time or Link's Awakening or something. And everything's kind of perfect in the middle there. This one, definitely the dungeons are not the best part of it, but it is still a fun game overall. I think the Minish mechanics get kind of ignored in the second half of the game, and that's also disappointing. But overall, I was happy to play this. I'm glad it's on Switch. And between this and Mario and some other stuff I've found in that GBA app, even though it's not that many games they've put in there yet, there are a lot of killer games in there. There's also Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga that I would love to have time to play again, because that's a classic. Overall, I'm really loving that they've added these, and I hope they keep up support for the Game Boy stuff, because this is definitely the best classic game emulation they've done, and it's cool to revisit some of these classics.
Awesome. Yeah, I've always wanted to play Minish Cap. It's one that, like, I played little bits of it, but I never actually, like, fully committed to that game. That was, like, back when you could rent games, including GBA games. And I remember liking it, but I do not remember, like, anything about that experience anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely worth playing. Like I said, I had my issues with it. It is a Zelda worth playing. Like most Zelda games are, Zelda has a pretty high batting average. This is definitely part of that. Maybe not my absolute favorite. And it is cool. Like, you can tell when it was made that this is a post-Wind Waker game, because it kind of went in on that aesthetic, but instead of a big 3D cel-shaded game, it's a 2D pixel art game. And it really is some of the most gorgeous pixel art you'll ever see. And that is why it is such a good showcase for what Nintendo's done with their GBA games here.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to you eventually playing Wand of Gamelon when you complete your Zelda adventures. Did you ever play I'm trying to think of other ones. Did you ever play, like, Phantom Hourglass and the DS ones?
Oh, I forgot those existed. Okay, I have more to play than I remembered then. Yeah. No, I have not played those. Okay. There are a lot of Zelda games. Yeah, one day I will. I am curious about some of those. Yeah, there's a lot of Zelda games, aren't there?
Yes, there are a lot of Zelda games.
Yeah. Because I'm at the point where I can say I've played every Metroid except Other M. And I think of Metroid and Zelda as similar series in that regard, but obviously there are many more Zelda games than Metroid games.
It turns out, Zelda's a bit more popular than Metroid is.
But anyway, it's cool. I do hope they add those Oracle games from the Game Boy Color, because I know I would love those ones, and those should be coming soon to the Game Boy app, so that'll be nice as well.
Yep.
And eventually we'll get those fucking Fire Emblem GBA games, and I am very excited for that, because those are very cool games as well. And everyone will get to experience the majesty of Lindis in the original Fire Emblem, see why she's the best, and she will be there.
To show all these modern day Fire Emblem fuckers what it's like. It's like, no, there's no hub world. What are you talking about? A world map? Fuck off, man. You talk and then you fight, and then you talk and then you fight. That's it. There's no exploring. There's none of that shit.
Yep. I mean, some people got that because they did release the original NES game, and that is the same way. And I did enjoy going back to that because it reminded me of GBA Fire Emblem. But absolutely.
Yeah, modern day Fire Emblem people are spoiled with, there's no grinding in Fire Emblem. It's like, you didn't level up your characters well enough? Well, start the game over, motherfucker, because that's the only thing you can do.
That is very much, that happened. God, the original GBA Fire Emblem, I played it on the Wii U when they put it out there, and that was definitely the final battle. You have to use the main, two characters very heavily, and I had them under-leveled because I'd been focusing on some of my side units, and I had to save scrub through that because I was fucked. That game is unforgiving, and I love it.
Yes, so hopefully more people will be able to experience that.
All right, Sean, anything else you got for us?
No, I think that's it for me. It's just been a lot of video games, that Hi-Fi Rush, some Melty Blood. I mean, I also have been playing, the other thing I've been doing, but I cannot talk about this because my brain would melt if I tried to, is I've been playing the Fate Stay Night visual novel, but I can't. That's like, I could talk about that in May or something. I don't know. It's like my whole existence would crumple on itself if I tried to talk about playing that game right now when we've recorded those podcasts, but they are not out yet.
I mean, we've also been doing stuff that is a complete secret from everyone because it's stuff coming out over the summer. Anyway, we're going to stop being coy, and instead, we'll tell you what we're covering next week here on the Weekly Stuff podcast. Oh, yeah. You guys might have heard that there is a Super Mario Brothers movie coming out from Illumination Entertainment. It's coming out in April. Other than the Chris Pratt thing, it looks surprisingly good. I've been impressed by the trailers. So that is coming, and we might even review it here on the show. But as, we like to do little retrospectives from time to time. So, if you didn't know, this is not the first Mario movie.
Oh, no.
There was another, as Yoda would say, in 1993, starring a man named Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo. And we are going back to the past, and we are reviewing Super Mario Bros. From 1993 as penance for our sins. This is, we went to confession and confessed our sins, and the priest said, okay, say a Hail Mary and watch and review Super Mario Bros. On the podcast. And that's what we're doing.
They're making a new one, and it's like, there has to be a reckoning. That movie must be watched.